I'm in Japan. Where are you guys all from? India. Oh, cool. We just did an event in India. Well, a virtual event in India, Mexico City. That's cool. I've never been there. I almost had an opportunity to go there right before the fun with the virus. North Carolina, Houston. Okay, I got some family in Houston. I got a good friend in North Carolina. Um, yeah, we just did a big virtual event in India. We had 3 weeks, 3 full weeks. So Switzerland, never been there, but my family was from Italy, so that's somewhat close, a little bit south. So I think maybe I should probably get started. Swiss. I'm going to maximize my screen so you can see the full slides in the window there. Right now, I only have it partially. So I'm going to lose sight of the chat. So if you need me to like stop or re-explaining, if you have a question, you want to jump in, you got to use the audio. All right. So I'm going to maximize this here. Okay, so I'm going to speak for it. It's about 15 slides here. It's very short, but I'll probably speak for about a half an hour. Feel free to interrupt me. That's perfectly fine. This is the first time I'm doing this presentation, so it's going to be rough. But it's on a topic that I'm very interested in, and I'm going to be expanding very, very substantially. So I was very thankful for Bruno to ask me to come to this conference. So this is navigating the madness of blistering change. And, I wanted to think of a good title. I had initially like learning or something like that, which was very boring. The bottom line is you just look outside your window and you can see that the world is on fire in some ways. Depends on what country you're in. At the very least, things are changing in 2020. But, even if you go back 19, 18, 17 previous years, the rate of change has been only increasing since you were a kid. However old you are, since you were a kid, the rate has always been increasing. So these are some lessons that I've learned in my career and in my life, basically, for being forced to change as well as driving my own change. And some of them are, I think, should be pretty interesting to developers because they might resonate with some of your issues, culturally, as opposed to marketing people, which currently I'm in marketing at Oracle. I'm a community manager there, and I actually came from the Open Solaris project at Sun, so I have some open source experience as well. So let's get in right here, and this is me in 1985. So it's like 30 years ago, right? I have been a developer over the years. I've been an editor, a publicist, a writer, a photographer, a videographer, software project manager. I've managed software projects. I've been a open source community manager at Sun, I mentioned. I've been involved with Open Solaris and Java and NetBeans and Juxta with Bill Joy. I mean, lots of things, lots of open source projects. But this is, I'm probably 20 years old in this picture, about 22 actually. This is actually how I started my career. That's actually my cat right there. It was 130 grand at the time, which at the time was a substantial amount of money. It's a beautiful machine. I started out in construction. I owned the business. I ran it for 5 years. And through some very tragic circumstances, I was very seriously injured, and I had to leave the business. I lost everything, lost all my money, lost most of my friends, lost my health, and had to go back to school and start over. So a few years later, I ended up as a writer. I'm not going to go through each one of these, just 3 here to show you how massive change actually can occur. I ended up writing, so I went back to school and I learned, new skills and stuff. Um, became a journalist, a writer, and I've written hundreds of articles. So my interest is mostly on science and biotechnology and healthcare issues for obvious reasons, since I've been in many, many hospitals, I can assure you personally. And then some years later, come up to Oracle, which is now, you can see I'm substantially older here. This is just actually, 6 months ago or so, 7 months ago, in California at Code One, which was the newly branded from Java One. So now in this job, I'm a videographer, right? We travel around to conferences. It's basically a community management job, but from a marketing perspective. When I did community management at Sun for Open Solaris, I was in engineering. I worked on the kernel team. And so it was a little bit of a different type of community management. But this job here currently is community management, marketing, communications, and developer relations, these kinds of things. And one of the things I do is video interviews. I've interviewed hundreds of Oracle engineers and engineers in various Oracle communities. These are Java people and Linux people. And I try and focus mostly on open source issues, just as it's my personal interest. Now, these are three absolutely massive jumps in a career, and there's been more. I'm only showing three. There's actually two additional ones, absolutely massive in terms of skill sets necessary, in terms of the networks. Each one has its own network. So when you make a career jump from one paradigm into another, you don't bring your network over with you. It's destroyed, and you have to create an entirely new network, and that takes time, right? So another thing that happens is when you change careers this radically, is things like this happen. That's actually my car. It's my Jetta there on the right-hand side. It got wrecked. I wasn't in it, but it illustrates a point. The guy behind me there, who was driving up my rear end, he fell asleep at the wheel and he ran off the road. That was just parked there, and off to the right is a telephone pole. And he wrecked my car, right? So why did he fall asleep on the wheel? Was he working too hard? Maybe. I don't know the circumstances. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But the point is, if you make really, really radical changes in your career, either if you're being forced to, or if you want actually to make those changes, you need to be mindful of how you're doing it. Because one of the things I've learned is I've made 12 job changes across 4 specific industries: construction, publishing, biotech, and software. Now, I did this quite stupidly just through brute force hard work. And that might work for a very short period of time, and it might work if you're young, but none of us stay young forever. And the brute force hard work catches up to you, and you can crash. I know many people, actually, when they hit their 40s and 50s, they've worked very, very hard in their early years, and through circumstances, hey, life happens, right? But they've worked themselves into being very, very sick, heart attacks, strokes, these kinds of things. If you're young, this might be foreign to you. It'll be more familiar to you as you grow and your colleagues experience these things and your friends, and hopefully not you. But I did. This is what I did, and this is how I ended up. And so I had to find a better way of dealing with change that came at me from the outside, as well as creating my own change just because I wanted a new job, a new career, or growth, or whatever. Because this way is not smart. So I started by looking in the mirror. And by the way, the reason I'm showing pictures is I'm a photographer and I just like photographs. This is actually an image from actually an Oracle developer event in Seoul last year, Seoul, South Korea. So the first thing I had to do is look in the mirror. I need to learn some new things. I need to deal with external change better. I need a strategy. I need a plan. And so for the last few years, I've been researching this substantially to help myself deal with these, types of things. And so I started reading. And there's 3 books here: Deep Work, Make It Stick, and The Formula. And the icon with the stars there is a software application. These 3 books have moved me very deeply. They're actually written by very serious people. Cal Newport on Deep Work is a professor of computer science at Carnegie Mellon. The 3 authors on Make It Stick. Peter Brown is a journalist, but Rodier and McDonald are they're cognitive scientists. They do hardcore, legitimate scientific research on learning. And The Formula, The Laws of Success, written by Barabasi. He's a physicist and network scientist at Northeastern University in Boston. These are all very serious people. They are self-help books, so you can read them for general interest, but there is a ton of science behind it and a ton of neuroscience behind it and education science. And it's very interesting. I've read a lot, okay, but most of the books I throw out because they tend to be a little bit trivial, tips and things like this. All these people here are doing original work, right? All these books are based on the original work of their authors, as well as, work from the field. So I just kind of distilled down a couple of things to help myself. If it's helpful for you, great. Just a couple of terms on top there: focus, learn, recall, apply, test, and leverage. Basically, it's just a way for me to organize what these people are saying. And so now I'll go through all 4. So this is basically an outline of Deep Work. If you've never read the book, it's very readable. He should be familiar to you in terms of culturally. He's a computer scientist at Carnegie, and he's also, Deep Work's about focus. And one of the things you learn about the book right away is, Newport wants to know what you are paying attention to, how deep are you going, and for how long. And all 3 of these things are very, very important: the what, the deep, and the length. He defines deep work as focusing without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks. You don't just focus on anything. I can focus all day long on my experience water skiing and playing hockey and things like that. It's very pleasant, but it's not deep work, right? So this is stuff you have to work on. Work is right in the title, right? Another thing to realize about this type of work is that it's very, very valuable. It's increasingly valuable in today's world, but it's also rare. And, social media, we're all on social media, we're tweeting around, and we're on shallow work, up on the surface all the time, right? This is something that you have to put in deliberate practice. Right. This is not something that, I'm just going to concentrate harder. I'm going to take a few hours and I'm just going to, grind it through. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about practicing this. And there's a really, really, certainly interesting, but a very, very important reason why, and that's neuroplasticity. That's sort of a general term for basically how your brain adapts and changes and physically changes. So based on its circumstances, what you're thinking about, the environment, your age, things like this. One of the things that happens when you focus deeply for hours at a time, all right, on something that's very demanding, is that you're firing specific neural pathways over and over and over again, as opposed to working on the surface where you're firing a multitude of things. This is focusing on one, or probably theoretically fewer, right? Because I doubt you're focusing. I doubt you're only firing one neural circuit. But the point is, you're narrowing the scope as much as possible to fire that over and over and over again. And this is how your brain tries to learn something. And through this repetition, certain cells are liberated and they begin layering myelin sheath around the neurons. Myelin is a fatty substance around the neurons, and it helps to increase the, it helps to so basically it helps to increase the efficiency that that the information is flowing across the wire, basically your nerve. And this, one of the theories is this process of healthier myelin sheath around the neurons helps to preserve the health of the neuron. And basically, this is how you cement your skill. Basically, this is what happens when you learn something new. You create a neural connection. Okay. Now, there are multiple theories. The whole concept of neuroplasticity is vast. This is just one little snip, from the book. But this is one reason why you want to focus deeply. This does not happen if you're on the surface. If you're flitting around with email, you're playing around with Twitter, all these different kinds of things. It only happens when you go very, very deeply and go over and over and over again. So he goes for long walks in the woods, but he's not just looking at the flowers and the trees, which is a pleasant experience. He goes for long walks in the woods and he's thinking about, algorithms. All right. He's a PhD. And so he's trying to solve very, very hard problems. This is also something you schedule. You do it every day. Okay. And you can start with an hour, but 4 hours is probably the max that a human can take. You also need to balance this with shallow work. I'm in marketing right now, and I can tell you one of the core weaknesses of marketing is that the majority of the work is shallow. You're in and out of meetings all day long. You do a lot of whim things. Some competitor announced X, Y, and Z, and you have to respond. There's lots of things that take you out of deep work, and it's the characteristics. The vast majority of the work that I do is shallow, and this is a problem. This is a bug, and I have to solve that bug because the real value, the thing that gets you promoted, according to Cal Newport, is your deep work. All right. You must still do the shallow work. You have to answer the emails. You got to go to the meetings, all these kinds of things. And as engineers, that disrupts your flow. Right. One of the things I've always liked, about talking to engineers about is this whole concept of multitasking and context, switching. They hate it, right? You guys hate it because you realize that in order to code something that is, complex, you need to go deep, right? And context switching is a real cost. I have never in my life spoken to anybody in marketing who understood these concepts. So that's not a knock necessarily, but it's just descriptive. Marketing people can be very, very creative, but they're working on the surface way, way too much. Cal says if you really want to be valuable, you need to master hard things and produce at an elite level. So if anybody can do what you do, what you're doing is not hard. And you have to do something harder. You have to learn something harder. And this is a message that I have taken very personally because like I said, a lot of the work that I do is not hard, right? And so it needs to be harder. So that's why this book has moved me so much. And this is not the same as flow. People say flow. I was in this flow and I was coding, or I was doing some sport and I was going, perfectly well. Everything was great. That's fine. That flow is valuable, but flow is about doing something flawlessly that you already know. All right. Deep work is hard, uncomfortable sometimes, but it's learning something new. All right. So this is an incredible book, and there's some real neuroscience behind it. And that's a quick summary. Next is learning. This is the best book I've ever read on learning. And the thing is, it's not even close. There's lots of books on learning, lots of books on how to learn, tools and techniques. I read this thing and I was blown away, literally blown away. I have it on ebook. I have a paper copy, and I have it on audio as well because I pick up different things, from each format. Some of these concepts in this book have been around for decades in the scientific literature. And it's like, you wonder why you've never heard of some of these things. And, if you read a book like this, you'll spot others that are like it. To me, it's the standard. And so there's a lot of science in this book, but the book, actually, the text was drafted by the journalist. There's 3 authors. 2 are cognitive scientists and 1 is a journalist. The journalist is the guy who actually wrote the text, and he basically he wove a lot of stories, anecdotal stories to illustrate the science. So although there's a lot of science, there's storytelling in there as well that you can relate to as a person. Some of the key concepts here: anti-intuitive. A lot of people think they learn okay. They'll study hard, they'll cram, they'll do well in a test, they'll learn a new coding language, and they'll get the project done because they just brute force, right? You just work hard and you do it. But the data actually suggests the opposite. If you adopt some of these innovative ways of learning, you might feel uncomfortable doing them because they're new, but they're more efficient long term than the old system, of the old ways that we all learned in school. Another important concept is mastery of familiarity. Do you really master your subject, or are you just familiar with it? Can you chit chat about it, or can you go actually do it? Very, very different. You know, I often listen to programs and podcasts, and I think I know a lot about it because I listen all day long, you know. But then when I try to explain it to somebody, I don't really know it. I don't really know it that well. So mastery, think in terms of actually mastering something, not just being familiar with it. Active recall. This is probably the most important concept of the book. I think he talks about learning is more about getting information out of your head than putting it in. So because you're in a class, or you have a book open and you're learning a new language, or learning a new tool, or some algorithm, or something that's, you know, complex, it's going in. Okay, that's fine. That's good. That's the first step. But it has to come out as well. And active recall is the process of training your brain to get the information out. And one of the ways that you train your brain to get the information out is through spaced repetition. Now, when you learn anything, you have to repeat, right? Whether it's a foreign language or really anything, right? You have to learn a new word, you repeat, and then you try and use it and all these different things, right? But there's this interesting concept called spaced repetition, which I had never heard of until just a few years ago, where you repeat at different intervals. In other words, if you learn a new word today and you know it tomorrow, that's nice. Now, don't try and, you know, think about it, you know, the next day. You shouldn't see it for a few days. Like, let's say you're learning a long list of words, like 100 words, right? In vocabulary or something, or terms. You want to space out the work, so you're learning things at further and further, larger and larger intervals of time. It's, you know, spaced repetition. The reason why this is important is you want to force your brain to almost forget something, and then force yourself to reach in and grab it out again. That process of coming in, oh, what is it? Oh, I know it. There it is. It's this, right? That process of kind of groping your way through, that's where the actual learning is taking place, right? Spaced repetition, active recall. And you'd be surprised, like when I talk in a few minutes about this tool, Anki, you know, to help you actually do these things. It's a very powerful concept. The next one is interleaving, and this is also anti-intuitive. When we learn something new, let's say you know Java. Let's say you know C and you want to learn Java. You know, a lot of people just sit down and only work on Java, right? Or, you know, I want to learn Japanese, but I might want to learn Chinese as well, so I only learn Japanese, you know, sort of in isolation. This concept of interleaving means that you should learn multiply related things simultaneously. In other words, you don't block things. You don't learn one thing and then move on to the next thing. You learn a little bit of this, and you learn a little bit of that, and you learn them at the same time. This is an important concept, so your brain can create more neural connections. You know, that neuroplasticity is very, very important. And your brain will make connections that you're not aware of. You know, you always, you know, you're in a class or something, and you learn something, you say, oh yeah, I remember my father was talking about that 5 years ago, you know, at something in physics or whatever, you know, because he's a physicist and you're learning physics. Your brain remembers, and when it is forced to or when it's presented a circumstance when all of a sudden new information is there, all of a sudden this old information just comes up. That's why you want to interleave. You want to learn multiple things simultaneously. Now this will slow you down, by the way. That's fine because you're actually learning it more effectively and much, much more deeply. And the research shows this very, very specifically. The next thing is to apply and test. Obviously, when you learn something, you want to apply it. If you're just going to sit through a class and learn something, this is a career conference. You want to learn things to help your career. You want to go out, you want to learn new languages, you want to have new jobs, have new colleagues, and do new functions. You need to apply what you learned because you really learn by doing, right? But there's also this concept called testing. Now, a lot of times people say, oh, you shouldn't test too much, right? Well, testing, according to Make It Stick here, is actually a part of learning. It is in and of itself a learning tool. In other words, it's not simply measuring what you know, but you use testing as a tool to learn. But low stakes testing, quizzes, basically. So you learn something new, and then you close the book and you close your eyes and you see if you can recall it. That's a quiz. Or if you want to write the quiz out, write some questions out. Constant low stakes quizzing, right? As opposed to like when you're in a class, when you're in school, you start the class, you have a midterm and a final, or at least we did in New York. This is completely different concept. It's constant quizzing. Again, it forces active recall. And then I think one of the last things here is to teach. So because teaching is not the same process as doing, and it's not the same process as recalling. Right? It's not the same process as learning. They're all different. And teaching, if you can teach something that you do, like to your colleague, or to somebody who doesn't know anything about it, that's a different way of applying the knowledge, because you have to get this person to understand it, and they're going to question you. They're not going to understand it. You're going too fast. You're going too slow. You're not saying the right thing. It's not a judgment on what you can or can't do. You may be great at your job, but if you can't teach it, right, that just shows that you might not know it as well as you think you know. You might, but that's another skill, right? And it's a great way to check yourself. Oh, maybe this section here, I really don't know as well as I thought I did, because I know steps A through G, right? But H on, I start to talk in generalities, and the student will recognize that, and they'll call you on it. It's a very, very effective tool. Now, if you don't have anybody around you, like I don't have anyone here, I'll learn something new. I'll just walk around the living room here teaching somebody, an imaginary friend, right? I do that all the time. Determination, this is not easy. If you read this book, and if you're serious about this book and books like it, I can assure you this is not easy. This is not a book you read for fun, right? This is a book that is going to challenge you. Learning should be hard. The hard part is the learning. That's the part that's exercising the muscle when you go to the gym or you run or swim. And it's also the part that actually creates the new neural connections. Your brain is constantly changing. Neuroplasticity is real. Okay, so that's learning. Now recall. This is not a book. This is Anki. It's a software application. It's also an open source project, which should be familiar to everybody on this call. Anki in Japanese means memorizing or memorization. That's the kanji up there in the first line, and also the hiragana. And I live in Japan, so there's a big, I have a daughter and she goes to school here, and there's a great emphasis on memorization in Japan, and in testing and things like that. So when I heard about Anki, and I only really heard about it a few years ago, I was blown away, totally blown away. Just like Make It Stick is the best book on learning I've ever read, Anki is the best software application I can think of to sort of implement some of the concepts in Make It Stick. All right. And all it is flashcards. It's the simplest concept in the world. If you were in school, we used to have flashcards, right? You write something on one side of the card, close your eyes, what is it? What is it? You turn it over and you test yourself. It's quizzing, right? It's flashcards. It could not be more basic. But this is a smart flashcard system. It's got one of these algorithms in there. This is not 1982. We have computers now, and they're smart. And this particular application was started by some engineers, and everything about it has that personality. It's well documented. The interface is clean, but very, very simple, very bare, right? Very expandable, and you can create very complex flashcards with Anki. And the really cool thing about it is focused really on two concepts: spaced recognition and active recall. And but it scales these concepts massively. So if you've got 500 flashcards, right, all on paper, right, this is hard to manage. And how do you learn that via spaced repetition? You got to keep a spreadsheet to figure out how you and people have done this, by the way. They actually have embraced spaced repetition in an analog system, and they just write it on paper. But the algorithm obviously is going to track this for you. It's going to learn from your input. So how it works is very simple. You create a card. You type in, words you want to learn, or a concept, or whatever. As I said, some of these things can be very, very complex. You hit enter, and it's on the screen. And then, maybe it's a Japanese word, and you have to define it, right? And you think. Oh, yes. So I got it. Hiragana. Okay, I know what that is, a character set. So then you make a decision. Did you know it really well? Did you not know it well? Or you had no clue what it was? And that's where you input into the system, right? So if you knew it really well, then you go ahead 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it is. If you didn't know it well, you go back. You're going to see this card again in your same study session, okay? Now just think about this. So you got 500 cards, right? You got multiple decks. You could have several thousand, cards over time, right? And you get into this system where you're constantly learning, right? And the system, the application is managing this timing of the cards that you see. And it blows you away. It's the most interesting thing that happens within a couple of weeks. You realize, you start imagining, it changes your brain. You start to use visualization because you're constantly groping for things. What was that? What was that? Well, oh, it's this. Okay. And, you start to realize that learning is really about reviewing. I never knew this concept. I never really understood this concept. And this can get ahead of you really quickly. You can learn too much, so in other words, take in too much. So taking too much new information without reviewing it, right? And then you forget it. Anki won't let that happen. It will force you, and it's obnoxious in this way. It will continually force you to review. You'll see the same card come back again and again and again until you know it cold. Now it's your decision. You can lie, but over time you realize that the algorithm will definitely catch up to you, and you'll get very, very confused. Be totally honest with this. If you knew it well, fine, you can send it into the future, right? Sometimes you're working on cards and you know something very, very well, send it 6 months into the future. You don't want to see it. You want to bring in new things. And then you want to see that card in the future, and then you want to try and think of what it is, right? It's an incredible piece of software. And again, very simple concept. And yeah, it's an open source project. So, and there's lots of demos of this thing online. There's a whole community online. And so I'm a fan. Hey, I definitely admit it. I'm a fan. Okay, this book is, this is the last one here. It's called Leverage this particular section, this book I'm still reading, and it's a bit complex for me, I have to admit. There's the concepts that Barabasi is talking about, a lot of math concepts. He's a very good writer, but I'm trying to understand how he's deriving his data. This book really is about one thing. It's sort of the juxtaposition between performance and success. And again, I wasn't familiar with this. I always thought you work real hard, brute force, right? You work real hard, you'll be successful. Now, I learned the hard way that that's not true, but I always thought it was true, and that's what was told to me. Society tells me that, school tells you that, work tells you that. Work hard, you be successful. Do more, always do more, right? In your work, in your job, and it's not true. And so Barabasi is he's got a lot of other books out, actually, just on network science. And he's a very interesting character. He's from Eastern Europe, Transylvania, I think. And he studies protein networks, computer networks, and now human networks as well. And he's quite honest about this concept. There's a lot of hidden things in networks. A lot of this stuff is not known, and that's why you have this certain amount of trust. When you're networking, like at conferences, right? You go to a new conference, you're in a new field, and you're meeting people. Not much is happening right away, or you're contributing to a new community. You're still meeting people, and then at a certain point, something happens. You cross over some threshold where you created enough connections in the community. Now all of a sudden you're well known. Right? Now, all of a sudden, people are seeking you out. Now, all of a sudden, you get a call from a conference organizer to actually go give a talk, whereas you had to meet hundreds of people before this would happen. Learning is the same way. You got to do a bunch of work before your brain actually makes the connections and, oh, I got it. Now I understand it. So, your neural network and, inside your head, and the network out here in terms of so in terms of humans, there's some similar properties there. Now this concept of performance and success. So performance is something that you do, okay? You can work hard, learn a new skill, and you can perform that skill, right? But that is something that is bounded. You can only run so fast. You can only write so many lines of code in a day. You can only travel to so many conferences before the physical limit is reached, right? But success is unbounded, and that is not only up to you. Okay, it's partially up to you. Your performance influences your success, but the success truly is up to the community, or your network, or the market, or however you want to talk about it. And again, this was quite a revelation to me, because he puts very serious math around both of these concepts, right? Really, really interesting. He's got lots of YouTube videos, and he's got a lot of content out there. So a short way to think about it: your performance is about you, and your success is about us, which is the community. Now you can see this kind of concept of being unbounded with success. Just look at like sports or music, or really any field where somebody is compensated just massively, right? Are they really that much better than the next guy to get tens of millions of dollars more? When you're just moving into a new job, you're going into a new position, and you're competing with, you can kind of see some of the people that are also going for the job, and somebody else gets the job over you. Are they really that much better than you? Sometimes yes. Sometimes performance is obvious. The distinctions are obvious. Someone is way faster than you, way better than you. Sometimes it's obvious, but many times it's not, especially among the elite performers. It's not obvious, because the distinctions between the elite performers is tiny. It's very, 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 very small. in those cases, that's where the network comes in. That's where the community, comes in. And this is one of the main reasons why you want to contribute to communities, whatever community it is. And every single field has a series of communities. If it's not necessarily, the term community is very much used in open source and software development. Other fields might not use that term, but they might use the term network or just the field, right? And so this is a very, very serious matter that this guy measures with math. It's fascinating, and I'm not as familiar with this. Certainly haven't mastered this part because I'm still reading the book. But some of the things that are actually anti-intuitive here, everyone says in Silicon Valley, it's the young people. It's those young, startups. They make all the money and stuff. And Barabasi says, no, it's around age 50, in terms of the age 50 is with the most profitable time in your life if you're in the startup business for selling startups. And one of the reasons why is a lot of there's so many young people, with startups, they flame out, right? He studied the field of science. Now I'm talking that he studied the whole field of science, right? All several hundred years. What people say is only the young scientists, the Einstein discovered many of his theories when he was in his 20s, right? So you're only going to be valuable when you're in your 20s. And that's partially true if you only study a small data set of the elite, right? Well, Barabasi studied all scientists. I don't know how he got that data set, but I mean, this is obviously a data science issue. This is a machine learning issue. I mean, you have gobs and gobs of data and you get all kinds of new relationships that you didn't know before if you have a very large data set. And he found very clear relationships. I'm not sure it's causative, but there were certainly associative relationships between productivity and innovation. So the conclusion is simple. Young people simply do more work. Older people don't. You get married, you have a family, you slow down, you have jobs, you have health issues. You're not producing the same thing at 50 or 60 that you produced when you were 20. And if you're, sort of a high IQ sort of person and you're in science and technology, you can produce some amazing work when you're young, right? And you can produce a lot of it. But as I said before, when I started this talk, you can also burn out. You can also get unhealthy jet quick. I mean, how many developers just exist off of pizza and soda? That doesn't go on forever. So, I mean, sooner or later, you have to eat well, you have to exercise, you have to sleep, these kinds of things. This is fascinating. When you increase the size of the data, when you have a massive data set, different relationships can be seen. So as far as Barabasi is concerned, innovation is not something for the young. You have to produce more, right? And so even when you're older, your production can also lead to innovation, but it's just that there's fewer opportunities for it because you're not producing as much. And the last bit here, perception in the community matters, and it matters a lot. And sometimes it matters more than your performance. So I'm still studying this, but that's enough of a summary for now. As I mentioned before, I live in Japan, and we have this phenomenon in Japan. Well, it's really everywhere you have a cherry tree, but here the whole country goes crazy in the spring, March, April, when the cherry trees come out, the cherry blossoms. It's called sakura. And I'm always struck by this because these little flowers are so dainty, so tiny, and they come for a week and then they blow away. The country goes nuts. They're all drinking sake under there. They all love it. Think it's, and I was just like, this comes and goes, right? But it's actually a good symbol. It's a good metaphor for my career because things blow up all the time. They come and go. My job changed when the earthquake hit up in Fukushima. My job changed when Sun was acquired by Oracle, and my project, actually went away. So Open Solaris. COVID-19, that's probably the mother of all changes. As I mentioned earlier, I had some health issues, lost my business, lost my money, lost everything. Everything is temporary, absolutely everything. And in your career, one of the things I've learned is that I don't want to lecture here, but I have to keep on learning. And these are some of the techniques that I am focusing on now. And that's it. And so back up here, I'll put these slides on SlideShare. It's just links here. If you don't know anything about me, these links will give you a bunch of information of my experience in software, open source communities, stuff at Oracle, photography, things like that. I'm pretty findable. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to end that now, and I'll come back here. I can see. So now I can see the chat. If I'm happy to answer any questions or have any kind of conversation. You can chat me or you can shout it out. Hope that wasn't too long. There's about 30 people here, so that's good. Patty, thank you very much. You're welcome. One of the things that I want to do is expand the sections on, with the books, the neuroscience. I want to expand and actually show how neurons actually are created and actually how they're broken as well. Because if you don't practice something, you lose the skill. And then apparently what happens in your brain and your spinal cord is the nerve actually breaks, the connection breaks. And so, basically use it or lose it, right? So, Maurice, Kathy, Raphael, Patty. See if I know anybody. I'm just scrolling up here. Dwayne. And this is my FOSS India mug here. First time I went to India was for FOSS India Open Source Conference. It was my first talk. I've been to India about 15 times now at this point. I really love it down there. Great place to go. Cecilia, thank you. So if you have any suggestions, I'm on Twitter at JMGRIS, or criticism. I'm always open because I'm learning, right? And let me know, and we could certainly talk more. And yes, so I'll put it on. Can I put it on here? Is there a way for me to put it on here? I'll put it on Twitter and I'll put it on SlideShare. But if there's a way of me attaching a file, I don't see. I don't see a way to attach a file here. Yeah, I just tried to drop it in here. Yeah, I don't have a link yet. I don't have it. I don't have it posted, but I will have to. I'll put it on Twitter, and you'll see it on the on Bruno. I'll tag the conference hashtag. Because I haven't put it online yet. So Raphael, you said you love the books. That's really good. Yeah, they're pretty popular. I think deep work has been around for about 5 years now, and but Barabasi's book on the formula for success is pretty new. It's only about a year or so old. And nobody I know has ever heard of Make It Stick. Nobody. So if you ever heard of Make It Stick, that seems to be a hidden gem. But well, the people that use Anki certainly know about Make It Stick. So, oh, really? Teacher in Brazil? Nobody knew. Okay. So what I will do is I'll share a link. I'll put this. I will put this presentation here. This is where I keep all of my Oracle stuff. And it's just kind of like all of my projects. I'll put the presentation there. And so look for that tomorrow. Dwayne, cool. Good to hear.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, how you doing? So is that okay?
Yeah, fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you very much. I'm just here to tell the guys, if you guys want to join in video, just share your, I don't know if it's here or here, but there's a tab here to share audio and video, so you guys can talk in live video with Jim. Don't lose the opportunity. It's amazing. It was incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you. So are you guys all familiar? So are you all friends of Bruno? Is that how you found out about this conference? Because I think Bruno knows every human alive. I met Bruno at Sun when because he was at Sun when I was at Sun on the Open Solaris project, and he was obviously involved in Java, and I did some early Java marketing work as well. Okay, well, I think it's 3 o'clock in the morning here in Japan, and it's a Friday. So actually, it's a Saturday morning, and so I'm going to go to bed, and I might check out a few of the other talks to see who's talking right about now. How can I get involved in an open source project? Well, I think there's certainly like a million of them on GitHub, right? And I would start with something that you're familiar with, obviously your field, if you are a web developer or whatever kind of developer you are. I'm not an engineer. I'm a project manager, but I've contributed content basically, and audio and photography and things like that, and documents as well, to projects. Also, just reviewing things, website content, little things like typos and stuff. One of the things that I learned in Open Solaris is that the people that get to have a say in the project are the ones who contribute. I was in the office of one of the kernel engineers one time, and I was saying, this one guy in the community is kind of upset about something, and the engineer just went to his computer to check the gate to see if he had been contributing, and he hadn't been. So he really doesn't get much of a say. You get the say when you contribute, right? And that's the real value of the community, is you can become very well known, very, very, very well quickly, if you're actively contributing. And if you're not a kernel developer, if you don't have code in your back pocket, you can just, you can write things. You can update the website. You can offer to write an FAQ. You can, something that you offer, you're offering it for free. It's a contribution, right? All here, we've got people from all over the world. Most of you people are bilingual at a minimum, bilingual. So maybe you'll help with the translation. That's a contribution. You can translate something, because in any open source project or any website, not all of it has been translated. Not all of it has been localized. There's always something to do, or even just improved, right? This translation in this particular web page is poor. Here's some ways that you could improve it, right? If you're a native speaker in that language. All kinds of contributions. So, and the thing is, I would also look for an open source project that wants your contributions, because they don't always want your contributions. Sometimes open source projects are, it's just a couple of people. They have some code, they put it out there, and they really only want a contribution from like a core hacker or something like that. If you're just starting out, you want to find a project that has actually specified on their website, we're looking for contributions. These are the things we're looking for. Maybe they have some bugs. Maybe they have tagged a few bugs in the database that are specifically for new people, right? These are nagging bugs that hadn't been fixed all years. The fixes are relatively easy, but you're not going to necessarily pull a senior person off to do that, and they have them all in a pile off to the corner, and that's something that you can contribute to. It's a way to contribute. And I've always contributed content. That's what I've done. And all the pictures I've taken thousands and thousands of pictures. A lot of them are snapshots, but some of them are actually quite good. If I get myself a good camera, then I can get some high quality images. They're all under Creative Commons licenses. So everything I've written, except for the magazine stuff, but all the stuff, for open source I've written has been under an open source license, which is Creative Commons, right? And I'm always thrilled when I get an email from some magazine somewhere that said, hey, we used your picture. Here's a link to it. We gave you attribution. Thank you. It's just, wow. I mean, incredible, right? So my contribution is content, but it's open source content, right? And so cool. So I hope we can see each other sometime, not virtually, actually. I know you guys here are all spread around the world, but I've done a lot of traveling for this job, and it all stopped, obviously, as it has for you. But I do hope that someday we can meet, and if we are, if you're in Japan, give me a ping. When you can travel again. And I'm in Osaka, so most people go to Tokyo, but that's actually a day's trip away, a little less than a day. But so I hope to meet some of you at some point, and when the world gets back to the old normal. So, okay, Raphael, be good. All right, guys, I'm actually going to turn in now, so I'm going to click the leave button. And since I'm the host, I guess, I wonder if that ends it. I should ask. Okay. So I'm just going to click and catch you guys later. Okay. It was fun. Thanks a lot. Cool. Bye-bye now.